It's Black History Month, and this week we're going in focus on the Wilmington Massacre, 125 years later. The massacre erased years of economic and political progress for Black people in our state. It would take 90 years for North Carolina to send Black representation to Congress following the coup. Joining us now to share their perspective are two current Democratic North Carolina U.S. representatives and members of the Congressional Black Caucus, Representative Alma Adams, who represents North Carolina's 12th District, and Representative Valerie Foushee, who represents our state's 4th District. Thank you both so much for joining us today.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you.
So Representative Adams, let me start with this. You know, both of you were born here in North Carolina, had at least some of your education here in North Carolina. Was the Wilmington Massacre something that you learned about while you were getting your education?
Well, I learned about it while I was getting my degree after high school. It was when I came to North Carolina to attend school in the 60s. That's when I really heard about it.
Representative Foushee, you know, this was a coup in the United States. Do you think that this is something that kids are learning about, either in the past or even currently today?
I think there is wider knowledge of it now, certainly than it was when I was in high school. And I think a lot of that has come out of the acknowledgement of what happened in Tulsa. And with that, there has been more importance shown about what has happened, what did happen in Wilmington. Interestingly enough, I didn't learn about it as a teenager. I was also an AFAM major at UNC, Afro and African American History, which is when I learned about the massacre, or the insurrection, as I would call it.
Right. Well, Representative Foushee, you know, I think some folks, even when they're learning about it today, are surprised to hear a southern city in the 1800s had so much Black leadership and Black power at that time. It's not necessarily what we think of the South from the 1800s.
No, it is not. And that's why it's so important that there is a general knowledge of that now, because as many of us find it difficult to get into elected service, that we are seen as credible candidates, that we're seen as qualified candidates. That's not a new thing. It has been that way. And except for what happened in Wilmington and other places like it, African Americans were serving in leadership.
Representative Adams, you know, a common phrase we hear today is about how elections were stolen, or that there is an election security. This actually is a case of an election truly being stolen. Ballot boxes were stuffed during this. This is something I feel like we can point to when we talk about elections in our country.
Well, absolutely. And, you know, folk are talking about, or at least we've heard about, stolen elections. You know, I was here January 6th a couple of years ago. And of course, we continue to hear that. But I think it's probably, you know, when we look at the makeup of the legislative bodies back then, it was probably more unusual to have had a multiracial body back then. But so we're really seeing these tactics today. It's really troubling to me how hard we've worked to elevate ourselves, and of course, Representative Foushee and I both have been out here for a while. I think I've been out here maybe a little bit longer than she has in terms of serving. But when you think about the road we've traveled and how far we've come, and that was really, and she used the right word, that was really an insurrection.
Well, I want to continue to talk to the two of you a little bit about how we still feel the repercussions of this today. But first, we're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be back with more right after this. Welcome back. It's Black History Month, and this week we're going in focus on the Wilmington Massacre. 125 years ago, white supremacists violently overthrew the elected government of the then majority black city, resulting in the death of at least 60 African Americans and the displacement of more than 2,000 others. This coup marked a significant turning point in North Carolina's history. Two black North Carolina U.S. representatives are back with us now to share their perspective on this insurrection. Representative Alma Adams, who represents North Carolina's 12th District, and Representative Valerie Foushee, who represents our state's 4th District. Thank you so much for staying with us. And you know, after this coup took place, it took so many years before we saw another black member of Congress from North Carolina, which was in 1992 when Eva Clayton and Mel Watt were both elected. Both of you have been in elected office for a while. Representative Adams, I mean, when you look back, that's not that long ago for when we sent our first black members to Congress.
Well, you're exactly right, Loretta. It was certainly within my time span. I was very pleased to have had the opportunity to serve and I'm serving the 12th district, which was the district that Mel Watt had for 20 years. And then, of course, Eva Clayton, great role model and inspiration to me, was the first African-American woman to serve in Congress in the 1st district. I think that was the district. And, you know, so she and I have something in common. I was the first African-American woman to serve in the 12th district. But yeah, it took a long time. And when you think about those 80 years without representation, you know, we're talking about the civil rights movement coming in and so forth. So it was memorable for us to even be able to run for office and to continue to serve.
With that, I'm the first African-American woman to serve from the 4th district. And when you look at what has transpired over time, you see that Congresswoman Adams in the 12th, where Congressman Watts was, and you see you saw G.K. Butterfield, right, and now Don Davis in the 1st district as Congresswoman Clayton, and now the 4th district. I find it interesting that there are only 3 such districts can say that an African-American has served in Congress, unless I've missed something.
I think you're right, and I had not thought of breaking it down that way. And I mean, right now we have 16 members in our delegation, 14 in the House and 2 in the Senate. And we have 3 African Americans serving for North Carolina, which means that about 18% of our delegation is black versus 22% of our population. How, as an elected black leader yourself, Representative Foushee, how do you continue to make sure that your voice is heard in Congress?
Thank you for that question. You know, I always say that being the first is not as important as ensuring that you're not the only. And so for me, is to make sure that we're taking the opportunity to mentor where we can and to encourage people to be a part of the process.
Representative Adams, do you feel like we talked about how many years it took for another black member of Congress to go, but you know, when we look at what happened in Wilmington, that they definitely wanted to make sure that there were not black elected officials in that town. Do you think we still feel ripple effects of things like this today in politics in North Carolina?
Well, I think we do. All you have to do is to look at the egregious gerrymandering and the redrawing of these lines. And you mentioned how many folks we have now, 16, including the 2 in the Senate. But if you look at the new maps, that's another story. It's not going to be an even 7-7. It possibly will be an 11-3 or maybe a 10-4. You know, I taught art for 40 years, but that's not good math. And it's certainly not helpful in terms of including people and allowing to have the kind of diversity that's reflected in our state. So yeah, we're going to have to continue to work on that. We're going to, as Representative Foushee has said, we're going to have to mentor and let folks know that, look, if you run, you can win if everything else is in order as well.
Well, I appreciate both of you coming on and sharing your perspectives. An important conversation for us to be having, for sure. And hopefully some folks are learning something about a little bit of the history here in North Carolina.
History is important.
Thank you.
And more than
Absolutely.
100 years after the coup, the General Assembly created a commission to find out exactly what happened. Coming up next, the vice chair of that commission shares some of his findings.